Hello and welcome back guys. Today we are starting a new story titled, Quirkless Izuku, written by Anthony Tyler 9, please check the link in the description, and let's start. 200 years ago, back when the world was just learning about space and slowly making waves into the space program, a small child was born in Qing, China. This baby was born with the uncanny ability to seemingly glow out of nowhere. The main problem for this was that soon after that moment many other children across the globe had started gaining abilities that were seemingly supernatural. Within the next 100 years across the world, the meta-abilities that the doctors had come to name as quirks had taken over all of society as they soon made a new profession for the world. Heroes. These people would take money in the form of a paycheck as they would do their very best in order to protect the peace of the world. These people would vary from all kinds of looks, from the normal human being who could emit fire, ice, wind, water and many others, to mutated heroes and heroines who had the appearance similar to that of an animal from the animal kingdom. But with this new profession in the world, came the antithesis of this profession. Villains would pop up in order to fight these so-called heroes as they gained reputation from these kinds of fights. Sometimes a hero would die in the fight, becoming a martyr in making waves for new heroes to come about. Other times the hero would win, most of the time capturing the villain and making sure that they are placed in jail, as well as the occasional killing of a villain. This would produce heroes that killed any villain they deemed as too villainous to stay on the street. Not many heroes do this today, but they were dissimilar in the past to this. This is the story of how I became a hero, an underground hero who was fighting crime without a quirk. A male voice called out, as we appear in the past of the main character's life. In a hospital room we find a green-haired woman who was in LBR, as she had been pushing with all her might to get her child out of her stomach and into the world. This woman was Inko Midoriya, and she was in LBR with her husband's child. Her husband's name was Hisashi Midoriya, and he was the Midoriya matriarch as he took care of Inko and her life as the man of the house. He was standing next to Inko as she held onto his hand with a grip that could kill many young children from the force alone. Inko Midoriya had a quirk that was essentially useless to most professions in the world, with it being a minor telekinesis, whilst her husband had a powerful quirk that allowed him to breathe as well as consume fire through his mouth, as he used this ability in order to become a support engineer in America. He was on vacation with his wife when she had been in LBR, as they were visiting the hot springs in downtown Mizutofu, Japan. Within 15 hours a baby boy was born on the 15th of July in 2XX as Inko and Hisashi looked at their child, who bore the messy hairstyle of Hisashi and had a mix of their hair colors. The baby boy's hair had the roots of black hair, with the outer rim of it being a light forest green. When the baby opened his eyes for the first time, he looked at his mother with appealing emerald green eyes. They were big and expressive as he looked around his surroundings. Inko looked at her husband as he stared back at her. This was their child, and they would make sure that they dedicate their lives to making sure that he was a good child growing up. His name shall be Izuku Midoriya, and he will be capable of achieving his dreams in the future when he becomes old enough to do exactly that. Hisashi said, as he stared at Inko. Green hero. Really? Inko asked, giggling. I don't see you coming up with any kind of names. Hisashi sputtered out, looking away angrily. Do you want to hold him? Inko asked, looking at her husband. The man looked back and held out his hands as he held his baby in his arms. Getting a closer look at his son, he noticed that he had a distinct set of freckles on each cheek of his face in the shape of a diamond. Similar to his son, Hisashi had freckles on his face, but they were more pronounced on his nose and under his eyes than on his cheeks in a diamond shape. He would smile at his son as he took in the scent his son would have after just being born, and he looked at Inko as they would begin the next stage of their life. Now with their son in their lives, nothing would stop them. Hisashi, you are needed here in the States. We need your expertise as well as your quirk in making sure that these buildings are built without fail. Hisashi's boss from America called out angrily. Sir, I am on my vacation. I just got here not even a few hours ago in Japan. I can't just leave them like this as soon as my wife just gave birth. Hisashi growled out. I don't care if you have a wife and son, I need my best worker, god damn it. His boss slammed his fist on his table on the other side of the line. Hisashi looked at his sleeping wife as he growled angrily on the phone, telegraphing his anger to his boss at the choice being given to him. "What will happen if I continue my vacation here in Japan with my family?" Hisashi asked, cautiously. "You will be fired from your position, and you will be sent back to your home there without any kind of income to keep your family safe," his boss said, as Hisashi growled even more. In his childhood his friends had stated that his growls were similar to dragons in movies as well as stories they had heard from animes they had seen in their past. As Hisashi left the bedroom while his sleeping wife would unknowingly never see her husband ever again from this moment. Hisashi would leave a note on the counter of his home as he would head out, and make sure that he sends most of the money he gains from America over to them in order to keep them living in this home. He couldn't and wouldn't ever let them become homeless whilst he worked overseas, and he will most definitely never give up on his family. Leaving during the night, he was never seen again from his family, although they would always get calls in the future from him. That next very morning, Inko would wake up to find her husband gone and sigh in defeat. She had heard the sounds of her husband on the phone the previous night as she knew that he wouldn't ever place his family in danger and made sure to leave a note telling her about what had happened. She would then hear the crying of her son Izuku as she ran towards his bedroom to find him lying on his back in the crib crying as she moved over and comforted him. "I'm sorry that Daddy isn't ever going to be here to watch you grow, but Mommy will be there to show you the way. Maybe I can make sure that you can achieve your dreams in the future," Inko said, as she rocked her baby back to sleep. A few weeks would pass by without any sign of Hisashi returning to his home with Inko and Izuku, and it finally set in that Hisashi's job had forced him to leave his family permanently. Inko would cry in her room whenever her baby was sleeping in order to hide the pain of her only other pillar of love gone from her home. She looked over at her sleeping son as she made a silent promise to always and forever love and cherish him as well as provide him a place to stay no matter the cost. Not only that, but to support him in his dreams for whatever they may be when he grows older to take care of himself. She could see it now, her son having a mix of her and Hisashi's quirk saving people with an honest-to-God smile on his face. She would make sure that this dream was attainable for Izuku as she made plans for when he would get the training as well as mental training in order to become strong as well as mentally strong enough to defend himself in the future. She got another job as she made sure to save that money she had gotten in order to place it to his education as well as place it into an account where he could use it himself, should something bad happen to her. It was about 3 years after the disappearance of Hisashi that Inko would reunite with an old friend because her 3-year-old son had met a boy with the last name of Bakugo. When she was brought over to this Bakugo's house, she was returned with a familiar face of Mitsuki Bakugo who was the mother of the little boy of that family. "Mitsuki-chan!" Inko cried out, happily seeing her old friend again. "Inko!" Mitsuki called out happily as she pulled the mother into a hug. Little Izuku at the time had no idea what in the world was happening but was happy that his mother was happy since she had been crying a lot more recently. He entered the house with his mother as they talked about their childhood as Izuku listened in with rapt attention. It was here that Mitsuki's son had entered the room and found Izuku listening to his mother's talk with his. "Come on Izu. I want to play heroes," he called out, as he pulled Izuku away. "Don't hurt him too badly, brat," Mitsuki called out, as Bakugo had yelled back at her calling her a hag. While the mothers had been talking to one another, Izuku and Bakugo were playing heroes with their All Might action figures. They had both learned a love and admiration for the #1 hero of the world as soon as his debut in Japan was seen on the internet. Katsuki Bakugo, Izuku's friend as well as potential best friend in his future, had admired the #1 hero for his tenacity as well as his ability to never lose against an opponent. Izuku however had learned to love and admire but not forgetting about respecting the hero's tenacity, heroism, as well as his general overall heroic actions in saving civilians first before fighting a villain. That video that he had always watched when All Might debuted on the internet had him saving hundreds of people within Tokyo all within an hour. He had saved hundreds of people with no signs of stopping. Izuku was playing with Katsuki as he had learned from the boy that he had already gotten his quirk really early, with it being similar to sparklers for fireworks as of right now. But in the future, Izuku predicted that the boy would be capable of making explosions that would rival the power of All Might alone in Katsuki's prime. But as of right now he was focusing on playing with his friend and keeping up with the boy in terms of training as well as brainpower. In their school Izuku was smarter than Katsuki, but since he didn't show any signs of gaining a quirk yet, his grades were lowered to be just under Katsuki in terms of when he will present his quirk. But sadly, as most good things, they come to an end as 2 years later without having a quirk manifest within his body. Izuku was taken to the doctor to see what was happening. Entering the hospital, they entered the room to wait for the doctor to run some tests in order to make sure that Izuku had a quirk. It would be exactly 3 hours later after thorough tests, Izuku's doctor would return to the room with some paperwork. "You should probably just give up," the doctor said, bluntly telling Izuku to give up on his dream. "What are you talking about, doctor?" Inko asked. "Well, based on our research on your son, he doesn't even have a quirk factor, as well as the bones in his body show clearly that he is quirkless," the doctor said, pulling out a piece of paper showing an image of her son's left foot. "You see in this picture of your son's foot, in the pinky toe you can clearly see 2 joints in the bone itself. It was proven in scientific studies that if you have that second joint in the pinky toe you don't have a quirk, and so long as it doesn't manifest at the age of 4 he will not develop a quirk. I'm sorry to say that he will never gain a quirk in his future. I am telling your son to give up on his dreams of heroism before it's too late," the doctor said, walking away from the room to let them process the results. As they left the hospital that day, nobody would ever like Izuku again. The only one who even cared for him was his mother, since he never met his father. Izuku would go to his bedroom that night, as Inko prepared for their dinner, as he would watch the video of All Might's debut. And Inko had arrived at his bedroom door that night in order to call her son for eating their dinner when she saw a light coming from his room. Opening the door, she found a very familiar video playing in the background as Izuku turned around as he spoke. "You see that, Mom? There is always a smile on his face no matter how bad things get. Even when things seem impossible, he never gives up. Do you think that I can become a hero too?" Izuku asked, crying. Inko would walk over to her son as she looked him in the eyes as she kneeled down to him to let him see the actual tears in her eyes. She knew that if she never answered him now, he probably never would forgive her, so she made her decision. "Izuku, you know that I love you, right?" Inko asked, as her son nodded his head. "Well, no matter what decision you make. Whether you decide to become a vigilante, villain, or even a hero, I will always and forever make sure that you attain your dreams. That is the promise that I made as soon as you were born. I will not allow you to give up on your dreams all because of a diagnosis. I will make sure that you are trained mentally as well as physically in order to become the world's first, and best, quirkless hero," Inko said, as she let out her tears as her son cried with her hugging her. They would spend the most of their night crying in the other's arms as Izuku would cry on her shoulder thanking her for allowing him to pursue his dream. The next day that Izuku saw his friend, he found him in the park with his other friends as they were waiting for his arrival. Running to meet his best friend, the boy turned around as soon as he heard Izuku's feet stomping on the ground to catch up to him. "Hey Izu. What's going on? Why did your hag call you to the hospital 2 days ago?" Katsuki asked, looking at Izuku. "I went to the quirk doctor 2 days ago, Kaken," Izuku said, as he stared at his best friend. If anyone were to tell you that Izuku thought that Katsuki would never stray from him in his future, Izuku would believe you without any hesitation. After all, they made a promise to become heroes together in the future. "Well, what happened?" Katsuki yelled as he waited for Izuku's diagnosis. "The doctor told me that I was quirkless," Izuku said, as Katsuki stared at him with shock. As Izuku was about to tell him about his dreams as a hero, Katsuki then growled at him. "So, you are as useless as most of these extras around here." "Bullshit. There is no way you are quirkless," Katsuki screamed at Izuku, causing the poor boy to flinch from the intensity. "Kaken. Where are you going?" Izuku called out, as Katsuki looked back at him. "I will never be friends with a quirkless loser like you," Katsuki screamed as he ran away from Izuku. It wouldn't take long before his quirklessness would spread around the school of Aldera Primary School. Everyone soon learned that Izuku was born quirkless, and everyone showed looks of pity, as well as disgust at him as he walked around the school. That would be what would happen throughout the rest of his school year as he continued his studies there. But not even 3 weeks after his diagnosis, Izuku would be walking home after a very bad day at school where everyone was calling him useless as well as worthless. He found himself near a park. Looking over, he found a young boy holding his left arm as Katsuki and his friends lorded over the boy as they looked like villains. Izuku, being the caring boy he was, ran over to assist the boy on the ground as he stood in front of Katsuki. Stop this, Keikaken. He's already hurt. You don't need to continue like this. Izuku called out, trembling. Well, if it isn't the quirkless loser. Get out of here. Or else you would get what he gotten 10 times worse. Katsuki threatened. What did he even do? Izuku asked, calmly. If he can find out what happened, then he might be able to escape this without being beaten down by Katsuki. This BSTRD was talking about how his quirk was better than mine. I just came over here and just so happened to hear him talking about it like I wasn't in charge of this area. I just showed that worthless extra his place. Katsuki boasted, as Izuku stared at him in shock. Keikaken, that is just mean. He was just stating something that he thought was true. He already lost against you, just leave him alone. Izuku said, trying to calm the blonde down. It was soon after that Katsuki moved closer with his explosion sparking around his hands as Izuku was forced to slowly back away in fear. You know, with how you're quirkless, your name could be read in a different way. Katsuki said, ominously. What are you talking about? Izuku asked, concerned. Well, if you combine defenseless and Izuku together you create the word, Deku. Defenseless Izuku. It's a perfect fit. It means useless. Katsuki called out, as he attacked the green-haired boy without any mercy. After the beatdown by Bakugo and his cronies, Izuku was left on the ground all alone as the boy he defended had ran off without telling anyone about what happened. Izuku stared at the sky as one thing came to his mind as he thought about what his mother told him just last night. Just because I am quirkless, doesn't mean that I am worthless. Izuku said, as he got up from the ground and liked his wounds for the day. Hoping that the next one would be better for him, as an older Izuku speaks. That day I learned a very valuable lesson. Not all men and women are created equal. But that would be my first of many setbacks. But they wouldn't be the last. Pain, just pain. As soon as the beatdown was over with, Izuku was seen on the ground with blood coming from his mouth as he coughed and wheezed in pain. Everyone who watched this happen. They had decided to do nothing to Katsuki as he would become a great hero in the future and even recorded it so they could laugh at him. Katsuki had also gotten better at fighting since Izuku would use fighting moves and techniques against the boy to defend himself. Katsuki would just take those moves to increase his fighting ability and use that against Izuku whenever he tried the defensive strike against him. It eventually got late to where Izuku entered his class late, and the teacher gave him detention since that would allow Katsuki to continue his beating of Izuku after class. Izuku would walk to his desk, but not without his peers trying to trip him up and having him face plant the floor. Times like these, Izuku wishes he wasn't born in this world because of how these people looked at him with disgust as well as hatred. Even his teachers would mark him down as dumber than the rest of the class since he was quirkless and he wasn't allowed to be smarter than those with quirks. It was all of this, plus his peers, Katsuki's bullying and abuse, and the abuse and mental abuse he gained from the others where he gained his anxiety. He was very scared of others since they would never allow him to have a peaceful moment to himself without beating him down and reminding him of his place on the pecking order. Today though, Katsuki was extremely angry at the fact that Izuku was in the same school as him once more, and as soon as class was over, he pushed the boy over to the wall as he made a plan. Well, Deku, it seems like there are some girls who actually like you. I hope you give them a good date. Katsuki said, as he burned Izuku's chest with his palm. Of course, Izuku never showed Katsuki the scars he gained. From the boy, that would make him think that Izuku was not being truthful about his body being the way it was. By now Izuku had scars all over his body. The only places that didn't have scars on his body were around his groin as well as his rear. His face even had scars from the muzzles they would place on his face whenever he couldn't keep his muttering quiet enough to not disturb others. The next day Izuku would be waiting in a park for the girl who said that she wanted to date him, and admittedly the girl and him would have a lot of fun going to the mall, arcade, and finally heading to a small park where children would normally be at, but for some reason nobody was there. I really appreciate that you had fun with me. Izuku stuttered out, trying to be confident. Ugh. Who would really wish to be on a date with your loser but? The girl said, a complete 180 from her nice and happy demeanor from the date. Didn't you have fun at least? Izuku asked, confused. Of course not. You really think that all the places you took me was fun? I personally would rank you as the worst date a girl would ever again. The girl called out angrily. Then as if that wasn't good enough, her friends came over and with baseball bats, beat him down into the ground unconscious of what was happening around himself. There, at least you can die with dignity as a quirkless, worthless bstrd of the Midoriya family. The girl said, as she walked away from Izuku's bleeding body. It was that day from then on, Izuku would gain a fear of women and never lower his guard around both men and women since he couldn't trust any SEC out there with his heart. We eventually reach present day. Izuku is walking to school, jittery as well as hunched in on himself, hiding the muscular body he gained from all the training he had during his time as a martial arts student. He had won many battles in tournaments since he never had a use for a quirk and would defeat students from other schools of martial arts without a quirk of his own to use. They even used quirks in their battles in the tournaments as well, and the only ones he would ever lose to were occasionally Ojiro Mashireo, and Kendo Itsuka. These two had become rivals of a sort for him since they never knew about his quirkless diagnosis, and he would keep it that way until he entered a hero school. He would watch as some people stood watching a rookie hero fighting a villain with a gigantification quirk. Oh my gosh! It's Kamui Woods. The new rookie hero out there on the block. Izuku called out, in sheer joy. He would take some notes on the hero as he would watch the fight with his full attention. He really enjoyed his hobby of watching hero and villain fights since he gained experience of their quirks. As soon as the rookie hero was using his ultimate move to chain the villain in a bountiful amount of tree limbs, another hero came onto the scene, quite literally kicking the villain in the face on her arrival. Really? Kamui Woods asked, an incredulous look on his face. Hello everyone. My name is Lady. Nice to make your butt-quaintance. She said, giving all the reporting crews a great view of her butt. As Izuku made comments about her quirk as well as work ethic, a man with a star on top of his head looked over at Izuku as he heard the boy make his comments through mumbles. Hey! You looking to become a hero? He asked, as Izuku looked over at him. Yes. Of course. Izuku said, as the man said his next words. I look forward to your debut. He said, giving Izuku a thumbs up as Izuku blushed as well as noticed the time and ran to his school. As soon as he entered his classroom, the teacher lazily looked over at him and made a comment about his tardiness as Izuku apologized for being late. When he sat down for the class, the day went on as usual without much fanfare, although many of the other students took their time to bully Izuku during the reprieve of class. It was the final class for the day when the teacher came in with a bunch of papers in his arms. I know that you all are ready for the last few days of school, but you all need to finish your forms for high school. The teacher said, as he sat the papers on his podium as the students all collectively groaned in boredom. But I know that you all want to be heroes. The teacher called out, tossing the papers in the classroom as the class used their quirks except for two specific students. One Izuku Midoriya, and one Katsuki Bakugo. One for the reason that he is bullied for, and the other because he sees no reason to use his quirk when the extras could get him in trouble for it. Don't lump me in with these losers, teach. I am going to become the #1 hero without these BSTRDS. Katsuki boasted as the class erupted in sneers. Ah. It seems like Katsuki is aiming for UA Academy. I bet you will make it to that specific school without much fanfare. The teacher mused as he pulled out another paper with Izuku's name and school he wishes to go to. When the teacher looked at the image of Izuku and the school next to it, the teacher sneered at it before he heard Katsuki talking about the mock tests as well as the fact that he aced them completely. Ah. It seems like Midoriya wants to go there as well. The teacher said, ousting Izuku to the peers of his students with a smug look on his face. And the look on Katsuki's face was sheer pricelessness for the man, since he knew that he was poking the bear with the boy. He listened in on Katsuki berating Izuku for even trying to go into that school, and when they looked over the fact that he was training they still bullied him since he never fought back. Since whenever he fought back against Katsuki, Izuku would be punished instead of Katsuki, since Katsuki would start the fight. Every single mark that should have been placed on Katsuki's profile was placed immediately on Izuku's, since the quirkless reject couldn't even be close to human as of now. That was right, even after 10 years Izuku was treated as if he was a mere animal, not even human. It was after class that day that the teacher left Izuku alone with his main bully as Katsuki talked to him. Don't even think about going to UA, nerd. Katsuki said, grabbing Izuku's notebook. Hero analysis for the future. Are you serious, Midoriya? One of Katsuki's cronies called out, laughing. Katsuki would grab the notebook and place it between his hands as he would blow it up and then toss it out of the window. Keep in mind of this moment, Deku. You will never become a hero, no matter what that beach of a mother you have says. A quirkless, worthless BSTRD child like you, will never become a hero. And should you enter UA with this threat, I will kill you myself. Katsuki said, as he burned a handprint on Izuku's shoulder through his Gikurin. As soon as the boy was leaving the room, Katsuki looked back as Izuku was nearly in tears before he spoke once more. You know, there is a way for you to get a quirk. Katsuki said, watching Izuku's face become more hopeful. You should just forfeit your own life and jump off the roof. Maybe then you might be useful in your next life, or maybe become a woman for me to F, Katsuki said, as he walked away laughing. As Katsuki left the room, Izuku was left in the room tending to a new mental wound and physical wound for him to take care of. Leaving the building, he grumbled about Katsuki's new form of bullying being taken across a line that he would never wish upon his greatest enemy. Really, Kaken? Suicide baiting. What do you think would happen if I actually followed through with your advice? Izuku grumbled, sad about how his friendship had ended years ago. He still wished for Katsuki to come up to him and say that it was all just a prank and say that he was forced to do those things to him. But he knew better. Some part of his mind always told him that friends never act like that, but more importantly he needed to clear his head. He had been clearing up a beach as strength training so that he could gain enough strength to pass the physical exam to become a hero student. He had even made a makeshift Eskrima stick in order to fight with a chance of entering the school. He was walking under a bridge when he made comments about how he wouldn't let this push him further into his depression that he was feeling at the moment. Because of this shout, he never heard a sewer grate breaking from the ground at high speed as a sludge villain had appeared behind himself. It was only until a few moments later that Izuku heard the few words of the villain behind himself. Oh. Neat. A medium-sized meat suit. Aayawiawa. Izuku screamed. All Might POV, I was having a great day today. I had a day off from work, and I could finally relax with my quirk's ability to lower my timeframe as a pro hero. I was waiting for the moment I could get young Togata alone so I could talk to him and see if he was potentially a good fit for my quirk. But it seemed like the universe just wanted me to do some kind of work today as a sludge villain appeared and stole a woman's purse and tried to get away. Someone help. He stole my purse. The woman called out. Where are the heroes? Another civilian called out as I buffed up. Do not fear. Why? Because I am here. I called out, as I smiled at the villain. OHSHT, All Might's here. I thought he was still in Tokyo. The villain called out, fearful. Release that purse. I call out, as the villain drops the purse and escapes into the sewer systems. Jumping down into the sewer system, I follow the stench of the villain through the winding turns of the sewers as I lose him in the winding tunnels, DM it. I should have made sure to have enough time. I say, holding my left hip. I walk around the next sewer grate when I hear the sound of trouble above ground. Aya. Shut up. I am so glad you walked around here. I needed a meat suit. The villain and hostage called out. I buffed up once again as I jumped out of the sewer grate and revealed myself to the hostage and found a boy with green hair holding his breath. Do not fear. Why? Because I am here. I call out, winding up a Texas smash, DMN you all might. The villain screamed at me as he prepared a tentacle attack. Texas smash. I call out, blasting the villain into pieces around the small underpass. Catching the young boy in my arms, I place him on the grass and start to clean up the place before catching sight of a notebook on the ground. Collecting the villain up and placing him in one bottle of soda, I look at the notebook and read the contents. I am surprised that a boy like this had analysis like this. This is almost on par with most quirk specialists in the world. I so hope that this boy becomes an intelligence hero, he would do so much good. Walking over to the unconscious boy, I start to lightly smack his face to bring him back to the world of the living. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. I say, trying to wake the boy up. Eventually he wakes up as he looked around his surroundings and saw me up close. All might. The boy called out, confused as well as curious. I apologize for getting you into my battle, young man. I can't believe that I nearly lost that villain in the sewers, so thank you for the help. I hope you become an intelligence hero with those analyses. They are almost on par with my dear friend. Although I must leave, heroes cannot stay in one place for long, for they fight villains in time. I say, jumping away. Izuku was walking home as he thought about what his favorite hero told him about his analyses. He never knew that there was an intelligence-type hero out there, he only heard about limelight heroes as well as underground heroes. But he really wanted to be an underground hero though. The less people know about his quirkless features, the better for him to have a calm and good life. He would walk all the way to the beach as he started to clean it up more. He would always have a singular saying in his head when it came to how he viewed his days. Tomorrow is another day, Izuku. Tomorrow is another day. Izuku told himself as he continued his cleaning on the beach. Unknown to Izuku though, a blonde-haired skeleton of a man watched as the boy cleaned the beach on his own without anyone telling him to do so. I hope that young man brings the beach back to its original state. The man said, before leaving to head home. Izuku was cleaning the beach on Takoba Municipal Beach Park. He had been cleaning it for the last few months that he had been training. His muscular form was showing his strength as he lifted cars, washing machines, drying machines, and many others to the road behind himself as he worked his best to complete his mission. He was also using this time to train by himself in combat that he learned from his dojo that his mother sent him to on certain days of the week. Today was supposed to be his off day, but he wanted to clear the beach as soon as possible. He had also noticed how someone was watching him as he cleared the beach over the last few months. The man had a tuft of blonde hair that was eerily similar to All Might, but from what Izuku learned from his scouring on the internet, this man was Toshinori Yagi, the assistant of the #1 hero. He had taken to watching the boy as he cleared the beach without any kind of help nor goal seemingly in mind. But Izuku could care less about that, since he never had any friends. He never really had to worry about people coming over to his house in order to make sure that he kept himself distracted with them. He had been earning his figure all on his own as his mother made his dinners to allow him to grow and rip his muscles in order to get stronger. She had supported his dream of becoming a quirkless hero throughout his entire life since he was known as quirkless. The teacher at his dojo had made sure that he learned everything he had to from him, although he was very discriminatory towards him because of his quirklessness. He wouldn't allow it to get to him though. His mind was strong and so was his body. He wouldn't let this slow him down since he had merely a few weeks until the entrance exams. He wouldn't slow down now when he has so little time left for the exams. He was hauling a washer up the stairs when he saw the blonde-haired man standing nearby looking at the horizon. Are you alright, sir? Izuku asked, stuttering. No, young man, I am perfectly fine. Thank you for making sure that this beach is cleaned. It reminds me of my mentor in the past and holds a memory that I keep close to me about her. The man said, as Izuku nodded his head. A few hours had passed as Izuku was hauling the last bit of trash as well as machinery up to the road as he set it down near the road for the trash company to take away. He swiped the sweat off his forehead as he saw the blonde man leaving in the distance, shaking his head at the stranger danger part of his mind. He walked away. The man, however, had turned around just as fast as he followed Izuku all the way back to his home, never knowing that Izuku didn't know about his presence before entering his home's door. The blonde man looked at the exact door and nodded his head before leaving his mission of making sure that the kid was close to home completed. Izuku entered his home as his mother called out to him about dinner being done. He entered the kitchen and found his mother making his favorite dish katsudon, as his mouth watered from the smell of it. He couldn't wait to eat some of it as he walked to the bathroom to take a shower and clear his mind. When entering the shower, he moved about the small space as the makeup that was well placed all over his body had washed away, showing many scars all over his body. Starburst-shaped burns in the form of old scars, cuts that were from someone slicing towards his body, bruises from earlier that day, not to mention the bruise on his ribs from the kick he suffered from Katsuki kicking him in the ribs that morning. Izuku rubbed his hand all over his ribs, and when it ran over his bruised ribs he hissed in pain as he slightly placed his hand to apply pressure on it. He was then sent into a coughing fit as he coughed up some blood as he let it go down the drain. Looking at how that pressure made him think of a broken bone, he finished his shower before placing bandages over his chest in order to hide the injury. His mother's job had stopped paying her what was required of a nurse in Mizutofu General Hospital, and they couldn't afford to pay for a hospital bill nowadays. Especially since the doctors there were highly quirkist as well towards him, as they tried many times in the past to end his life whilst within their place of work. So Izuku had gained a distrust of authority figures ranging from heroes to police, to nurses and doctors, and teachers and principals of his past. Since his experiences had never been kind to him as well as those around him only wished for his apparent death, even his oldest friend that he had wished so much to return to his side and help him become a hero. Nobody would care if a quirkless individual died out there, and Izuku couldn't leave his mother out there without him. That would be asking for her to demand why he had to die, and her to commit seppuku herself to be with her only son that she loved. From what he heard about his father from his mother, he had died in the States because of a villain attack, and his money could only get them so far. So they were on their own until either he died, or his mother died, and he would subsequently be placed on the streets or in a foster home that would try their damnedest to kill him before he was placed in a new home. He left the bathroom with some more makeup over his face as well as his arms and legs as he placed himself in shorts and a t-shirt. Entering the kitchen, he found his mother setting up the table as he entered the room and sat down at the table. "How was your day, Izuku?" Inko would ask, as she placed his food in front of him. "It was good, better than usual. I managed to clear up most of the beach by now. I met someone new today though," Izuku said, as he ate his food. "Oh. Who was it?" she would ask, eating some of her own food. "His name is Toshinori Yagi. I don't know why he was here in Mizutofu when his main base is in Tokyo. So maybe All Might was nearby, and he was stationed near there and saw me cleaning up the beach," Izuku said, as Inko stared at him in awe. "Well, did he say anything to you?" Inko asked, curious. "He told me that he gives me his thanks for cleaning up the beach." It rekindled some memories he had about himself and his MSTR from his past. "I don't know who his mentor is, but I bet they were a really great person," Izuku said, as he was nearing completion of his food. "Well, I hope that tomorrow gets even better, sweetie," Inko said, as she gave Izuku a hug. He returned the hug after freezing for but a nanosecond. But as soon as he left the room and headed to bed, Inko stared at his retreated form and sighed to herself. Pulling out a piece of paper showing that he was kicked out of the dojo since his mother couldn't pay for more lessons for her son. I just hope that he forgives me for not being capable to support him soon. He will soon be incapable of joining any more schools after UA. After that it seems like he will be on his own. Inko said, as she held her chest as it throbbed. She was then launched into a coughing fit as he placed her hands in front of her mouth to cover it from germs. Moving her hand away, she felt something wet in it as she looked down at it. Red BLD as cold as can be. In it as she was in a cold sweat, she could only hope that Izuku forgives her for leaving him too soon. She had been diagnosed with cancer for the last few years and she got that diagnosis without him knowing a single thing. So with her slowly dying and reaching old age, she knew that her time would come soon, and there was nothing she could do to stop Izuku from joining her in the afterlife after her death. She could only hope that someone would be capable of watching after him when she was gone. He was too kind to be left all alone, he was too caring, compassionate, not to mention determined to make sure that nothing bad happened to her. But he was too late for the cancer that was attacking her from the inside out. She only wished that she could last long enough so Izuku could make his debut as an underground hero and bring smiles to the faces of the people he saves. It had been a week since Yagi had visited Izuku on the beach, and he had completed the beach now with only a few hours left on the clock before his entrance exams for UA begins. He had just left the beach in order to clean himself up and was near the front of the school of his dreams. Taking a deep breath in his nose, he walked through the gates as he walked with a small amount of pride. He didn't even make it 4 feet before Katsuki showed up screaming his name and shoving him to the ground as he walked by. Picking himself up, Izuku wiped the dirt as well as dust off of himself as he walked forward again as he entered the school. He entered a small classroom in order to take the written exam in order to make it into at least general education. He had questions that morally were for those who limelight heroes. They were as asked about what a hero should do when a villain is still fighting for their cause. Izuku had placed down that he would talk them out of it before they would cause their own downfall, allow them to come forward to him without any more fighting. But there was another question that alternated from the previous that made him think about his previous answer. What would happen if a villain were about to kill someone, and you can't do anything to stop him besides the morally wrong decision to kill said villain? Izuku stared at this question for a long while. It had been the last question on the survey, and he was stumped on what to do. If a villain was to kill someone else, and the only way to stop them was killing them, what would he do? He would like to say that he would try to stop him before that could happen by sacrificing himself for the civilian, but there was a hidden meaning here. The real question was, would you kill a villain if they were too far gone in the mind? Would you kill a villain if they were mentally so far gone that they were a liability to those around himself or self? Izuku placed down the best answer he could come up with as he closed the notebook as he looked up only to find that there was other students still struggling on the test. He looked at the time and found that there was only a few minutes left for the test to be over, and he turned in his test. The last thing we see on the paper was his answer on the test, the answer being, no. I wouldn't kill the villain since they are only in need of help. I would sacrifice myself in order to save the civilian. Izuku was waiting in the auditorium as the students who completed the written exam slowly filed into the room waiting for the practical exam to start. Izuku had his eskrima sticks near him as he was looking at the booklet that he found underneath his seat and was reading the rules. As Present Mike had started talking about the rules of the practical exam, Izuku mumbled quietly about what he needed to do in order to enter the school without being noticed by the other students. And you? The one who is muttering to themselves. You are very distracting. If you wish to distract others with your little muttering, then you should leave. The person who called him out called out to him. Izuku looked up and found most of the place laughing at him as he stared at the blue-haired individual who called him out to the audience. But before he could speak, Present Mike told him about what the boy missed as well as went into talking about a fourth robot that Izuku had already learned about in the notebook. Thinking up a strategy in order to get points, Izuku left the auditorium when Present Mike allowed them to leave. Sitting on his own, he never noticed how someone was looking at him as he focused on himself and his strategy in order to pass the exam. Standing before the area where his practical exam was taking place, Izuku started to stretch his limbs in order to make sure that he doesn't hurt them in the practical. He also took this time to look around the place to weigh his opponents who were vying for the same spot in the hero course. He saw the blue-haired young man staring at him with a silent anger, a brown bob-cut-haired girl calming her nerves down, and a very noticeable young man who had purple hair that was standing up on all ends looking at his hands as if thinking about something important. It was here that Izuku finished stretching himself as he started to move closer to the front of the pack in order to get a head start on taking bots down. "Are you all ready?" Present Mike called out from his position on top of the podium overlooking the potential students of the school. As soon as he got the nods of approval, he then started a countdown starting from 3, 32 go. Present Mike called out, startling the students, as Izuku ran off into the city. "Wow, Trigger happy much?" One of the prospects called out. "Wow, he really jumped the gun, he is so going to get disqualified." Another would say, before the blue-haired boy and brown-haired girl had run in after Izuku. A few minutes into the exam, Izuku found himself standing in front of a group of bots that were faux villains, and he had beaten them down into rubble. He counted each and every one and managed to get up to 35 villain points total from the group alone. He had only defeated one robot at the start of the exam a few minutes ago because everyone took the ones he was going to destroy. He was lucky that he found some in the buildings near the center and that nobody was smart enough to check inside the buildings. Inside a dark room, a group of shadows watched over the screens showing each and every battle arena where students and prospective hero hopefuls were fighting faux villains. "This batch seems like they are very fruitful this year," a woman said, liking her lips. "I know, right? We even have our first quirkless applicant." Present Mike called out, entering the dark room. Everyone looked over at him as a squeaky voice chirped, gaining everyone's attention. "Midoriya Izuku, age 14, quirk status quirkless." Haha. He is very intelligent for being quirkless. He managed to pass 99% of the written exam just based on his personality alone on them. He seems to be very stoic based on his answers, but from what I see in his shaky handwriting style he seems to be very anxious towards others on the cameras. From what I can see on his application to come here, he wishes to become an underground hero like Shoyuta. The squeaky voice called out, as the man named Shoyuta opened his black eyes to look at the screens at a green-haired boy. He was helping others who had gotten hurt as well as pulling out bandages to cover the cuts as well as bruises on others. He seems to be smart at least, but how many points does he have total? Shoyuta asked, curious. It seems like he has 36 villain points alone. But from the heroic points he is standing at a max total of 75 points. He really seems like a heroic person, just have to iron out the anxious behavior. Another man said, as he stared at the file. As they all looked at the screens, they noticed that the time was reaching the 2-minute mark for how much time was left for the entrance exams. "Well, let's give them a scare, why don't we?" The squeaky voice called out, pushing a big red button. Back in the arena where Izuku was, he currently manhandling some bots that had surrounded the purple-haired examinee. "Are you alright?" Izuku called out, pulling the young man up. "I'm fine. I had it handled, why did you even try to help?" he asked, using his quirk. Izuku began before the boy had shoved him away, telling him to go and leave him alone. As soon as Izuku was out of earshot, the boy mentioned something about quirkist BSTRD before he let his power drop off of Izuku. It was here that Izuku shook his head as he gushed about the boy's quirk and all its applications before the ground started to rumble and shake. Looking around, the buildings near the center of the battlefield fell to the ground as examinees had run in fear of something in the smoke. Izuku stared in awe of the monstrosity that stood before him. As some examinees ran past him, the blue-haired boy had passed by him, but as he got close, time seemed to slow as he looked at Izuku before carrying on. Shaking his head at the monster of a bot, Izuku turned to run away when he heard the sound of a girl in pain. "Owie!" Looking around the place, Izuku searched for the owner of the voice as she called out again. Someone help me!" She called out. As soon as Izuku caught sight of her, he ran towards her location without any kind of thought processing. Making it to the girl before the robot was upon them. Izuku pulled on the rubble that covered her leg as it moved just high enough for her to crawl out from underneath it. As soon as she was out of harm's way, Izuku looked at her and inspected her ankle as he wrapped some bandages around it softly. Looking behind himself, he noticed how the robot was nearing their locations very fast, and deciding to get punched by the girl later, he picked her up without any kind of warning, soliciting an eat from the girl as he ran away from the robot. As soon as they made it out of harm's way for the time being, Izuku placed her on the curb as he looked at her ankle again. He really wanted to make sure that she was fine since he didn't have much medical knowledge about the human body. "Does this hurt?" Izuku asked, poking the girl's ankle. "Ouch," she said, as she jerked her leg away from the prodding finger. "Okay, so it might be a sprained ankle, or a broken ankle. But Recovery Girl should be capable of healing it to where it won't hurt as much," Izuku said, in his little world, and saving the girl. "Time's up." Present Mike called out, as it took Izuku out of his reverie. "Wait, what?" Izuku said, a little scared from the sudden voice calling out. "Oh well, I guess that is the best I can do, huh?" Izuku mumbled to himself as he fixed the girl's bandages enough to where they wouldn't fall off. "You will be alright, I got to head home now. I hope to see you here if I pass," Izuku said, standing up. The girl nodded her head as she waited for the school's nurse to arrive at the area. Once Izuku left the arena, the others were talking about how he saved the girl and that he didn't get enough points to pass because of it. He was walking out the front gates of UA when he was grabbed from behind by a hand that was burning hot. As soon as he was pulled away from the grounds of UA, Izuku was tossed over to a wall and slumped to the ground. "What did I tell you about joining UA, nerd?" Katsuki called out, angrily. He had beat Izuku hard for a few minutes, leaving the poor boy on the ground and bleeding from his mouth, but he had a bone sticking out of his left arm. Something that he couldn't hide from his mother. As soon as Katsuki left Izuku there, the boy got up from the ground as he moved his arm to snap it back into place. As soon as that happened, Izuku used his jacket to use as a sling for his arm and limped back to his home to talk to his mother. Little did he know that the girl he had saved from the zero-pointer had seen the whole event happen and was nearly crying at how he had no reaction to snapping his arm back into place. She had hidden behind a trash bin in order to prevent herself from being seen by him, and she watched as he limped back to his home, and as soon as he disappeared from her view, she left for her home as well. She really needed to clear her head on what the hell just happened. Quirk assessment tests. Battle training. Izuku woke up the next morning as he was mentally preparing for his first day at UA. 2 days ago he had gotten the letter of acceptance from the school of his dreams telling him that he made it into the school. With him having 35 villain points as well as 39 rescue points, he managed to get a total of 74 points. He was ecstatic as he found out that he was going to be in Class 1A, but he was literally walking through his home as he prepared to leave for his school. His mother waited in the kitchen for him as she gave him a lunch for him to eat at his school of choice. "Please be safe, Izuku. I know that I haven't been all that supportive of your career choice in the past, but please just be sure that you don't die before me. Please." Inko asked. She asked him kindly. Izuku looked at her before nodding his head and giving her a hug, but as he was leaving, he looked back at her before saying one thing to her. "I know that you worry about me, Mom, but you don't need to place all of it on me. You can use your worry to keep yourself in shape. I don't want to lose you yet," Izuku said, smiling at her. Inko watched as Izuku left the house as he walked down the road to the school where he would learn to become a hero for the next 3 years of his life. She let some tears come out as she focused on her problems of dealing with cancer, as she had only one thought to her son. "I just hope that he can cope with me being gone in the next year or two." Izuku walked through the halls of UA as he was slowly making his way to the class where he would study being a hero for the next 3 years. He made it to the classroom as he heard some commotion inside, as only 2 thoughts came to mind. "I really wish that Kaken wasn't in this classroom. But at the same time, I hope that I can at least make some friends." Opening the door, he was greeted by Katsuki sitting on his desk with his feet on the top of it, whilst another student, the one who called him out during the practical event of the exams if he remembered correctly, he was admonishing Katsuki about the disrespect he was giving to the previous owners of the seat. Sighing with great resignation, Izuku walked over to his seat without garnering the attention of both boys as he successfully hid his presence from the rest of his classmates in order to get some semblance of peace. But it seemed like the world couldn't give him his peace because as soon as he sat down the navy-haired boy noticed his presence in the seat behind Katsuki and went to introduce himself. "Hello there, I am Ida Tenya, and I come from Semi-Private Academy," Ida said, bowing at a complete 90 angle. Izuku looked over at the boy before giving him a nod and handing a piece of paper to him giving his name as well as asking him to lower his tone kindly. "I see, thank you for informing me about the loudness. I will see to it at once that I am quieter," Ida said, walking away, and that was when Katsuki muttered to Izuku without anyone listening to him. "Why the hell are you here, Deku? I thought I told you to kill yourself." Katsuki grumbled to Izuku. "Well, I made it in, so can you at least leave me alone?" Izuku asked, as Katsuki gave a grunt in response before placing his hand on Izuku's left leg and activating his quirk and burning through the cloth and making a burn mark on his leg. At this point Izuku didn't react as he just sighed softly as the burning sensation had made his mind remember that he was alive. It wasn't long until the last student arrived in the classroom as she walked in and saw Izuku grimacing softly, and she smiled happily making her way over to him. "Hi. You're the curly-haired boy that saved me," she said as she got his attention. "You're the girl who threw up rainbows," Izuku mumbled to himself. Unfortunately, the girl heard him as she pouted at his remembrance of her as he reiterated his answer to her. My name is Midoriya Izuku." Izuku introduced himself as he cursed his stuttering in his mind. "My name is Uraraka Ochako. It's nice to meet you," she said, as Izuku noticed something on the ground near the entrance of the room. Tapping her shoulder, he gave her a look telling her to stop and head to her seat as he pointed out the caterpillar on the ground. Nodding her head, she moved away from him as she sat down in her seat that was unfortunately on the other side of the room from Izuku. Shota Aizawa was many things, but impressed was one thing that many failed to do on the first day of school. So imagine his surprise when the most timid of his class of students learning under him noticed his presence first and told another classmate to sit down. That's one mark on his mind for a very observant person in his class. Good, at least one of them noticed my presence before I even entered the classroom. The others on the other hand. Aizawa thought to himself before speaking out. "If you're here to make friends, then you should just leave," he said, as he entered the classroom drinking a jelly pouch. Standing up from his sleeping bag that was yellow in color, he stood in front of his new class of students that he was thinking would have to expel at some point. He began to tell the class what his intentions were. "You're here to learn to become a hero, not have fun in games. You will die if you are like that on the field. Put these on and head outside. We're having a quirk apprehension test," Shota said, before leaving the classroom. Sitting in one of the seats outside the classroom, he noticed a bunch of noise coming from the room as three figures come out. One of them was the first to notice his presence and the other two was a brown-haired student with a navy blue-haired boy. If he remembered correctly, the navy-haired boy was Ida Tensei's little brother, but the other two he thought would be good friends for the Ida's second son. Moving outside, he waited for exactly 5 minutes for everyone to come outside and was genuinely surprised when Izuku came out in exactly 2 minutes and 30 seconds. That was concerning if he was the first to come out before the rest of his class. From what he looked at in his file, Midoriya was very aggressive, as well as started fights. But if there was anything Shota knew about first appearances, it was that his gut immediately told him something was wrong with what he was seeing. Midoriya in his eyes, was very skittish, timid, and was very observant. Not only that, but he was looking around as if he was trying to find any and all exits for him to take as soon as possible if something bad happens. Ignoring it for now, he knew that Izuku was quirkless, but he wanted to see how a quirkless individual could do compared to his peers with his less than stellar training. He knew how to fight, as well as run, but could he stand alone next to his peers even with their quirks? As the rest of his students came out of the changing rooms, Shota had to suppress a sigh of anger as they had arrived at least 4 minutes later than Midoriya did. 6 minutes, you're getting better. But needs work. Now that all of you are here, do you all know what the quirk apprehension test means? Aizawa asked, as he stared at the students. None of them had risen their hands except for Izuku, who had been hiding in the back trying to not be noticed. Midoriya, what do you know about the quirk apprehension test? Aizawa asked, as Izuku stood before him trembling. I believe that it was you used to test the Q quirks of others in order to get the best number of how good they are at you using their Q quirks. Izuku said, looking at the ground. Aizawa looked at Izuku for a second before nodding his head, as he looked at the other students in the area. He spoke. What Midoriya has said is true. I am here to make sure that you all know how to use your quirks without troubles, as well as measure how well your potential for heroism is. Just to let you all know, only one of you will not be tested on this method and will be given the standardized tests. The way the old school system does these tests is completely wrong and illogical. You will use your quirks on these tests to see how well you do, and if you manage to get an even better score, then I will deem you worthy of being in this school. Aizawa said, as Uraraka spoke up. What about the orientation? She asked, incredulously. Real heroes don't have time for speeches about how to make the principal's fur look as shiny as it does on a regular basis. Plus ultra and all that. Bakugo, you scored the highest on the entrance exam's physical part. How far could you throw a softball in junior high? Aizawa asked Bakugo, 73 meters. Katsuki said, grinning. Use your quirk this time, and make sure that you don't hold back. Aizawa said, as Bakugo entered the circle as he grinned savagely. I will just add a small explosion to show these extras who they're dealing with. Katsuki thought to himself before getting into a pitcher's stance. As soon as his hand was at a 45 angle, his hand exploded with massive power as the ball was sent far off into the distance. Aizawa pulled up his phone as it showed Bakugo's score, and it was well over 700 meters, in fact it was exactly 2 meters. Wow! 750 meters. That's insane. Wow, I can't wait to use our quirks. This is going to be so much fun. All of Izuku's classmates called out, ending with a pink-skinned girl calling the last part out. Fun you say? Aizawa asked, as his eyes started to glow red. Well, if it's all fun and games to all of you, then whoever gets last place in these tests will be hereby expelled and will be blacklisted from all hero schools for 3 years. Aizawa said, before watching his students look at him in shock. But the one he was paying attention to the most was Izuku's. He was saddened by how resigned he was to be expelled from UA. That's not fair. We just got in here. Uraraka called out, trying to make a defense. Not fair. Would you say that when you have to stop natural disasters, villain attacks, and many more? No. Well, then it is a hero's job to make everything that isn't fair, fair in all terms of the word. Plus ultra and stuff, but you need to know that the world will not wait for you all to become the heroes that you need to be. Now get moving. Aizawa said, as some students lined up at the 50-meter dash. First up was Azuri Tsuyu and Ida Tenya. They started off well with Azuri jumping across the 50 meters, whilst Ida ran it. Ida got 3 seconds whilst Azuri had managed to escape with 40 seconds. Everyone else got a range between 5 to 8 seconds respectively, and Izuku was finally up against Katsuki as if the world hated him even more than he hated himself. He still thought about what Katsuki had told him about a year ago when he was in his final year of junior high. As the buzzer went off, Izuku ran as hard as he could while making himself as aerodynamic as possible and getting a score of 59 seconds. Way better than his junior high school record of 9 full seconds. The next test was the long jump, as everyone managed to jump past it except for Mineta, and he couldn't use his quirk to help out at all. Izuku managed to get near the edge of the sandpit here but was tripped up midair by Katsuki calling him a nerd. Katsuki got reprimanded by Aizawa telling him that if he makes Izuku mess up he will be expelled without reason. Next after that test was the grip test, and Izuku was 4th place here with a grip strength of 199 kilos, with the winner of this one being Shoji Mizo as he got a point amount of over 500 kilos. Next was the long run as Izuku was running and keeping up with Ida as he was in fourth gear and was lapping him many times. It was surprising that Izuku was able to keep up with everyone else in terms of stamina compared to others as Katsuki, Uraraka, Kirishima, Ashido, Hagakure, Jiro, Ojiro, Siro, and a few others had tapped out within a few minutes. The only ones left was Izuku, Tenya, Momo, and Shoto. Once that was done, up next was the seated toe touch as Hagakure and Ashido had dominated this test as they were incredibly flexible and Izuku managed to get fourth here as well, surprising most of his classmates with how flexible he was. After this was the sit-ups and push-ups as Izuku dominated this with Katsuki here. The only one who could keep up with them was Kirishima and he tapped out as soon as Katsuki did. As soon as the tests were over, Aizawa pulled everyone over to see how they did. Alright, these are the results. I won't tell you each individual answer, so I will just show the rankings to all of you. Aizawa said, showing them the rankings. Yaoyorozu Momo, Todoroki Shoto, Bakugo Katsuki, Kirishima Ijiro, Ashido Mina, Midoriya Izuku, Ida Tenya, Hagakure Toru, Ojiro Mashireo, Siro Hanta, Jiro Kyuka, Uraraka Ochako, Azui Tsuyu, Aoyama Yuga, Kaminari Denki, Shoji Mizo, Rikido Sato, Koji Koda, Tokoyami Fumikage, Mineta Minoru. That is all of your rankings. Do be discouraged as that will not only be the start of your starting line, but how you will rank your future selves at. Aizawa said, as Izuku looked at his ranking. Sixth, Izuku thought to himself. I could have sworn that I did worse than the others though. Izuku thought to himself. No. A wail was heard, as it was revealed to be Mineta Minoru. I can't be expelled now. I haven't even gotten to touch Momo's melons yet. Mineta called out in sadness. All of the girls had become more cautious of him as they shuddered tremendously as Izuku moved over to the boy without even thinking about it as he slapped the boy in the face. Get a hold of yourself. Heroes don't become what they are just to touch women. They protect people as well as the innocent. Izuku said, placing his hands on the crying boy's shoulders. If you really wanted to be a hero, you should only do it to rescue people as well as bring smiles to their faces. Not to be able to make a relationship with them. Izuku chastised as Aizawa wrapped him up in his capture gear. I was going to say that there was no one being expelled, but if you think that you can smack another student without any reason you better give me one now. Aizawa said, staring at Izuku with his eyes glaring at Izuku. Sir, Mineta-san had made suggestive comments about the girls throughout the tests. Not only that, but he made a specific comment about Yaoyorozu-san's melons and how he wanted to cop a feel of her chest. Izuku said, as the teacher had stared hard at Izuku's big expressive eyes. Anything else I should be made aware about? He asked, as Izuku mentioned about how there was a hole in the men's changing room linking their changing rooms between the men's and women's. Aizawa just sighed in anger as well as disappointment at Mineta. Izuku really wasn't helping the boy's case when it came to the boy's perversion. That was when Mineta had spoken up. That is a lie. He was talking about looking at the girls from the men's changing room. He stated that he found the hole and told us to look. Mineta said, before Izuku looked at him with an angered expression. I was on the other side of the changing room. I would never look at a woman like that, much less the girls in our class. They may be appealing no matter how they look, but that doesn't mean you can just look at them, Mineta-san. Izuku said, looking downright furious at the moment. Why are you saying that I did it? I wasn't even near the hole. Mineta called out, before Izuku pulled out a phone that recorded everything. Showing it to Aizawa, the man looked at Mineta and grabbed him with his capture weapon. Midoriya, you will have detention for attacking another student. As for Mineta, you will be heading to the principal's office about your lies as well as your behavior towards your female classmates. Aizawa said, dragging the boy away. The lesson plans as well as the syllabi are inside the classroom, make sure to read and memorize them. I will not make more of them. Aizawa said, disappearing in the darkness of the tunnel. As soon as they all changed into their clothes for school, Izuku made to grab all of his things as he left the school before anyone could see him. He was walking near an alleyway when he was punched from behind the head, sending him to the ground, swimming in his mind. So the useless Deku thinks he can enter my school, and make sure that he can be better than his peers. Katsuki growled out, as he walked over to the downed Izuku. The boy was just getting up when an explosion hit the boy's back as Izuku grunted in slight pain. I will make sure that you regret coming to UA without my permission. Katsuki called out again as he pelted Izuku's back with explosions. When he left Izuku there, the boy was edging on unconsciousness as he tried to get up off the ground. Once he got up from the ground, he made to move to the road when he noticed that his left arm wasn't responding to his beck and call. Looking down, all he could see was BLD on his sleeve, and as soon as he got a closer look at it, he saw that it was burned all the way to the muscle underneath his skin. Shaking his head in slight resignation, he walked all the way back to his home and made sure his mother wasn't around in order to clean up his body. After taking a shower that burned a lot on his body, Izuku replaced his left arm with some bandages that had burned cream on them as well as a healing agent in order to keep him from getting an infection. He would go to sleep that night unaware that his mother was staring at him as he left the bathroom in shock. Once he was asleep, his mother entered the bathroom and found that the bathtub was filled with BLD on the rims of it as she decided to clean it up. She wouldn't ask him about what happened that day if he didn't want to talk about it. He had clammed up about his school experience when he was a kid to prevent her from worrying about him. He was probably doing that now. So she had to be the good mother and keep him safe in his home, as well as make sure that his home was a safe haven from everything else in the world. If his home where he grew up was a safe haven, then God damn it, she will make it as safe as the Pentagon in the United States. The next morning was very hard for Izuku, as he was having trouble getting out of bed. As soon as he managed to get out of bed, he walked over to the kitchen to get some breakfast in him from his mother as she gave him his lunch for the day. Walking to the school was great as it was silent without anyone telling him where he should go as well as why he shouldn't exist. Overall, the day was fine once he entered his classroom and ignored the surprised looks he had when he sat down. The only one who expressed concern for him was Uraraka as she noticed the bandaged hand on his left hand and asked him about it. Are you okay, Midoriya? Uraraka asked, concerned. I'm fine. Jay just accidentally cut my hand making dinner yesterday. Izuku said, as he looked away from Uraraka. Class soon started as Mineta had entered the room, but not before spitting on his shoe and sitting in his seat. Making the day go by faster, the classes seemed to be normal as there was math, science, art history, as well as English. It was now time for the last class of the day as everyone was wondering what the teacher for the class would be. It wouldn't be long before Izuku heard the telltale footsteps of All Might making his presence known as Izuku revealed a smile for the first time at the school. I am coming through the door like a normal person. All Might called out, sticking most of his body through the door in his Silver Age costume. The class went ballistic on his entrance as Izuku had started to mumble to himself about how cool of a person All Might was in person. The man may have crushed my dreams a year ago, but he is still the coolest person in the world. Izuku would think to himself, as he gained a sad smile on his face. For today's class, we will be doing combat training. All Might called out, as he pulled a card for combat out. Battle training. Katsuki growled savagely. Although that is what we will be doing for this class, a hero is nothing without their hero costumes. All Might said, as he prepared to head over to the gym beta. Now get these on and head over to gym beta. All Might called out before leaving. As Izuku walked over to the locker rooms, he changed his clothes as fast as he could and managed to look at his hero costume. It was dark green with white lines going down the legs of it. It had a red plus sign on the side of the mask as well as a lower mask covering his mouth and nose. It had mechanisms that prepared him for gas attacks from villains, and the suit itself was massively fire and water resistant, as well as strike and cut resistant. He even had some Kevlar on the suit itself to prevent it from being blasted from guns from a distance. The massive Kevlar suit had been made to make sure that Izuku could defend himself from massive caliber bullets that could hit him from far distances. His mask gave him a unique look as it did most of his face and made his eyes look black in the mascara, and his emerald eyes would glow through the darkness. He even had some tentacles coming out the back of his costume to make it scarier, but the one item on his person that gave everyone a pause was the eskrima sticks as well as the bow staff on his back. He walked into the gym as he saw All Might staring at him with a small amount of shock before he walked over to Izuku. "This might be the only time I can say this, young man, but I want to apologize for my wording on that rooftop," All Might said, softly as Izuku looked into his eyes. "I have no reason to give you for why I was that harsh against you that day. I don't expect you to forgive me answer for you, but I just want to let you know that you can be a hero without a quirk." "What part of the profession are you searching for?" All Might asked. "I decided to become an underground hero. I can make people smile when all my classmates are asleep during the night, and make sure that the villains in the night are taken care of. And about the apology, I already forgave you a few months ago. I never could tell you how I felt that day because of the fact that I was still going through the emotions of being told no. But I could see it from your perspective, All Might-san. You were just trying to make sure that I don't go out to fight a villain without taking the full blame for it. I have always wanted to become a hero, so you telling me no, just made me train all that much harder to make sure that I couldn't become what you feared," Izuku said, reassuring the hero. "Well, I will tell you right now, you are doing a great job at that," All Might said, ruffling Izuku's hair. It was here that the rest of the class decided to arrive as Izuku sat on the ground next to the number one hero and pulled out a notebook and started writing in it. "They say the look makes the hero. All of you look so cool," All Might said, gushing at the students. "Wow. Midoriya, you look so cool," Uraraka said, as Izuku looked up at her. From her perspective it made him look more intimidating, as well as for some reason she could see pain as well as embarrassment in his eyes. "TT, thanks you, Uraraka-san, you look cute as well," Izuku said, looking away. "I know, I gave them my specifications, but they made my suit skin tight," Uraraka said, as she twirled around in front of him. As the class watched from afar, they could see the makings of a relationship building between the two since they were too adorable with one another. All Might told them all the idea of the lesson was that villains had created a bomb inside a building, and it was the hero's job to stop them from attaining their goal. There would be 2 teams of 2, and that would represent the teams of heroes and villains. They chose at random since that would make it seem similar to a situation on the field and nobody would know if they would get the perfect set of quirks or mines in the same area on the battlefield. Team A, Bakugo Katsuki and Ida Tenya. Team B, Aoyama Yuga and Ishido Mina. Team C, Midoriya Izuku and Uraraka Ochako. Team D, Yaoyorozu Momo and Mineta Minoru. Team E, Todoroki Shoto and Mizo Shoji. Team F, Ojiro Mashireo and Hagakure Toru. Team G, Jiro Kyuka and Kaminari Denki. Team H, Tokoyami Fumikage and Azui Tsuyu. Team I, Hanta Siro and Kurishima Ijiro. Team J, Rikido Sato and Koji Koda. Izuku vs Bakugo. Izuku, what happened? Bakugo and Ida were standing outside the building as they made to enter the front door in order to start the battle trial. All Might had just stated that they could begin the exercise and Bakugo was immediately off in order to find the quirkless BSTRD who somehow cheated his way into UA. That quirkless BSTRD thinks that he can enter MY school and get away with it. I will not allow this to continue. That quirkless Deku is dead. Bakugo thought to himself as he blasted himself up to the higher floors searching for Izuku. Ida was running up the other set of stairs as he heard explosive sounds coming from the 3rd floor. Bakugo-kun is really loud, we are supposed to be after the device that would end the exercise. I need to keep my mind on the prize, Ida said, as he ran through the building searching the doors. It wasn't long after Bakugo left that he had ran into Izuku re-entering the building as they crossed paths. So there you are, Deku, were you hiding outside from me? Bakugo said, as he initiated his quirk to release small sparks unconsciously filling his support gear with nitroglycerin sweat inside. I wasn't hiding, Kaken. I was doing something for the exercise, but if you want to settle a grudge match far be it from me to allow it to happen, Izuku said, getting into a battle stance. Uraraka is in the building behind me, and from where she is at, I can see her hiding the bomb under a tarp. That will be extremely useful since Ida will overlook it at first as something miscellaneous. I need to direct Kaken away from her. Izuku thought as he ran down the hallway as Bakugo followed in pursuit. About a minute later, Uraraka had entered the open window just in time to see Ida enter the room in search of the bomb. Villain. I have come here to end your evil ways. Ida said, dramatically. Snort. Ida-san. That is so hilarious. But I have to prevent Snicker. You from getting to the bomb. She said, snickering and laughing at Ida's heroic persona. Izuku ran down a hallway as he dodged explosion after explosion, the boy behind him getting more and more angry and sweaty at the same time as time passed by. Stop running, DKU. Stop running and face me. Are you a coward? Katsuki screamed behind Izuku. Nope. I am just keeping you away from the bomb. Izuku said, moving into a room with a lot of room. You just locked yourself in here with me. Katsuki said, growling happily. Yeah, in order to keep you away from Uraraka-san I have to keep you distracted. You won't be capable of finding the bomb since it is on the other side of the gym area. Izuku said, confidently. Bakugo looked at Izuku in shock before shaking his head as he launched an attack. I don't care about that thing. I am here to do one thing. And that is show you your place. Underneath my boot. Katsuki screamed as he threw his famous right hook towards Izuku. Using his martial arts lessons that were ingrained into his brain, Izuku dodged to the left of the attack, and grabbed the offending arm before he kicked Bakugo in the gut, sending the boy to the ground fast. As Bakugo landed on the ground, Izuku wasted no time in jumping on top of Bakugo as he prepared some capture tape and placed it over Katsuki's gauntlet, but just as he was about to fasten it, Bakugo blasted his back, sending him into the door of the room, knocking it off its hinges. Crawling away in the hall, Izuku managed to use the wall to stand up. His back was sporting some new burns that had lacerations on top. That's going to leave a new mark. Izuku said aloud. As he turned down to the doorway of the room he had Bakugo inside, the said boy entered the hallway as he found that it was a clear dead end. Ding! Both Bakugo and Izuku looked at the gauntlet in shock as Bakugo gained a battle-ready smirk that promised pain. Back in the room on the second floor, Ida was flying towards Ochako as she dodged his aerial kicks that were nearly fast enough to put her out of commission. She used some of the broken material that were taken from her surroundings as she created a shield around her body as she remembered how to create an orbit of rocks around herself. I personally think that you can focus on the area where they can float around you. They don't have to be behind you, they could be in any position, you just have to control the atoms around them in order to move them around you. Make sure that they are moving around the same speed as All Might when he is running. That way you can catch Ida-san off guard. Izuku said to her in her memory. As the rocks surrounding her moved about her body, she was ecstatic that her idea of using some of her energy in order to move the objects around her like a small orbit ring. Thank you, Izuku, for telling me that. She thought to herself as she ran over to Ida. The boy was moving towards her immediately as his speed increased in the small room they were in. Ochako had managed to move some of her rocks towards Ida as he ran forward, and some managed to stun him for mere moments before he continued his sprint towards her. Once he was within striking distance from her, she jumped in the air just as he did, surprise him as she grabbed his body with all 5 of her fingers as she took his gravity away from him. As he floated aimlessly in the air, he used his speed in order to launch himself at her once more, but there was a slight issue: he didn't have any brakes as he slammed into the wall next to him from his generated speed in the air. Using this to her advantage, Ochako moved towards the door as Ida managed to get used to being in the air. Running along the walls, he ran in her direction as he used the terrain in order to make his journey a lot smaller. Entering the hallway moments after she did, he ran along the walls in order to catch her by surprise. Only when he heard the release word come from her mouth he felt all his weight return, but he continued on running in order to catch her. He launched another kick towards her and managed to land a powerful kick to her gut, sending her down the hall. As she laid on her chest, she tried to crawl away in order to get away from him when he pulled out some plastic tape and wrapped it around her hands. Young Uraraka has been captured. All Might called out in the intercom. Before I leave, do you think you can tell me where the bomb is? Ida asked, as Uraraka laughed at him. I wouldn't want to spoil the fun. But it is on the other side of the gym training facility. You'd never find it in time. Don't even think about checking in the buildings behind us as it wouldn't even be there. Ochako said, as she initiated the plan that Izuku told. As Ida gained a look of shock, we returned to the main room where the class and All Might are waiting inside of. What the hell? Why would she reveal that information? Kaminari asked, incredulously. She just gave away the location of the bomb. Momo called out, a little confused. She really is bad at being a villain. Mineta said, leering at Momo's chest. Actually, she placed it inside the building behind the training one. The rules never stated where you had to place the bomb. All Might said, smiling. As the class watched the battle in rapt attention, they all looked at the location where Izuku and Katsuki were fighting. They were disgusted by what they were seeing though. Izuku was punched in the face with a left hook as he crashed into a wall behind him as Katsuki blasted his stomach. Burns old and new were revealed when Bakugo burned away the makeup that was covering them as Izuku slid to the ground. Standing up on wobbly feet, Izuku stares at Katsuki as the boy glowers at him in anger. Why won't the quirkless piece of SHT stay down? Katsuki screamed inside his head. He then raised his right hand as he pointed it at Izuku, who looked on in confusion before the ding from earlier rang in his head as if it was a warning bell. You seem to remember what this is for. Well, since you stalked me for most of my life and gained useful information about my quirk, this baby makes sure that the explosions that I make can become as big as they can be. And what do you think will happen if I use this thing with collected sweat that can explode? Katsuki taunted as All Might entered the intercoms. Young Uraraka has been captured. See? Even your teammate couldn't stay alive on your team. Katsuki said, pulling the pin. Young Bakugo. Do not release that explosion. All Might said, a bit too late. It won't kill him if he dodges. Katsuki screams, as the blast is heard over his voice. Boom. Smoke covered the area where Katsuki and the cameras were located inside the building. Ida was already outside and a few buildings away to hear the explosion. As the smoke was clearing, All Might gave Bakugo the strict orders to not use his other support gear in the same way unless it was a life-or-death situation. As Bakugo stalked the hallway, he found out that Izuku wasn't near the area where he was at and looked around the area. Don't run away from me. Coward. Katsuki screamed, as he ran off. As soon as the smoke and debris cleared up, the camera looked up and searched the room only to find Izuku on the ceiling of the hallway as he fell down and landed on his chest. Izuku coughed up some BLD as he looked at his chest and found that there was a big gash across it as he saw BLD coming down from his upper torso. Standing back up, he moved to hide inside another room as he pulled out some bandages and wrapped them around his chest. Coughing severely again, the people inside the room watching the event were shocked and horrified when they saw all the burn scars as well as the scars from multiple weapons all over his torso, but nothing prepared them to see the scars on his lower mouth as well as chin as well as around his freckles. All Might-san, are those what I think those are? Momo asked, concerned heavily. All Might see the scars as well as he gained a frown on his face. They were not there before he started the trial. Was he using hero-grade makeup to cover his scars? Jiro asked, as she stared in shock as well as fear. What the hell happened to him? Mineta and Kaminari yelled out in clear concern. Back inside the room, Izuku looked at the BLD seeping through the bandages in his chest as he looked in a mirror. Looking back at him was a 15-year-old boy who was very clearly done with life as well as dull emerald eyes that had seen the worst society had ever seen in only 15 years of being alive. Forcing himself up from the ground, Izuku looked at his wrist and found that there was only 1 minute and 30 seconds left on the clock. Uraraka-san, did you tell Ida like I said in the plan? Izuku asked, as Ochako replied back to him. Yeah, sorry that I got caught. Don't worry, it was all in the plan that you got caught. You lasted longer than I thought you would. You have made me proud. You may have lost the battle but we won the war. Izuku said, as he left into the hallway as he went to call Katsuki to his location. In the hallway Izuku had managed to catch the blonde bomber's attention as he immediately ran in his direction. Izuku led him down the hall and outside the building as he heard Ida running in his direction, and Izuku laughed at them both. What's so funny, nerd? Katsuki screamed as he attacked and was promptly knocked on his butt when Izuku kicked him in the gut before grabbing his face and slamming it into the ground only to kick him away to Ida. What's so funny is the fact that I sent you both on a wild goose chase. The bomb was inside the building here the whole time. Izuku said, laughing. That was when the timer for the event ended as Izuku's laughter ended as Ida stared at Izuku in shock. The bomb was inside the building the whole time? Ida asked, incredulous. Nope. Me and Uraraka-san had hidden it inside the building behind ours. Izuku said, before limping towards the room where the rest of the class were waiting. He even ran into Ochako on his way as she saw his scar-riddled body and ran over to him and helped him walk back to the room. Re-entering the building, everyone looked at him as if he was a completely different person. He had single-handedly outsmarted two of the class's smartest members with Ochako. But they had thought that it was Ochako that made the plans, they didn't have to know that it came from Izuku. Now that the event is over, who is the MVP of the first battle? All Might asked, curiously. Momo immediately raised her hand and gave her explanation as to why Ida was the MVP, and had All Might not listened in on Izuku's plan from the beginning she would have been correct. You are close, young Yaoyorozu. But you are incorrect. All Might said, as Momo slumped to the ground in shock at her being wrong. It was Midoriya. A quiet but blunt voice said. Everyone looked over and found Shoto Todoroki had spoken as he moved up to the front. Why do you say that, young Todoroki? All Might asked. He was going to say that it was Uraraka, but if she wasn't in Shoto's opinion, then he would hear Shoto out. From what I saw in the battle training, Midoriya had made the plan to move the bomb to the building behind them. Uraraka hadn't even made the mouth movements to give her 2 cents and followed through with his plan. But let's not forget the fact that he had made sure to plan that Uraraka would get captured as well. Everything that happened save the extremely large explosion that was way overboard from Bakugo was planned by Midoriya up until now. Todoroki said, and All Might was now seriously thinking that this kid was joking. Are you sure that Midoriya should be the MVP? All Might asked, curiously, only to receive a nod from Shoto. Shoto's right, Midoriya had told me the plan and I followed it to the letter of his words. And he knew that Bakugo-san would chase after him since the boy seems to have a sheer massive hatred for him. Uraraka said, as All Might lost all composure before Izuku spoke. Just take the MVP position. I am going to become an underground hero anyway, I don't want to have the spotlight. Izuku said, as he walked away down the hall. Ochako followed behind him to make sure the boy made it to the nurse's office, unaware of what she was making some girls gossip about their relationship. Alright, with Uraraka as the MVP, let's begin the next battle. All Might said, as he smiled at the class. Izuku was trembling as he walked down the hall as Ochako caught up with him fast enough to catch him from a fall. As blood seeped from his wound on the front of his body, Ochako lifted him up with her quirk and rushed him to the nurse's office. They arrived before the staff bots could leave and jumped, scaring the poor nurse inside. Jesus! Will you two just get him on the bed immediately? Recovery Girl said, completely serious when seeing Izuku's extremely hurt form. As Recovery Girl removed the bandages on Izuku's chest, she noticed all the other older scars all over his chest as she grimaced in pain as well as sorrow. I need to have some time alone in order to help the boy. Can you head to Nizu's office in order to get him to come here? And bring your homeroom teacher Aizawa as well. Recovery Girl asked as Ochako nodded immediately. As soon as the girl had left the room, Izuku opened his eyes to find Recovery Girl standing over him and stitching his chest up. You are going to tell me what happened to your body, young man. I cannot believe that one of our own students came here with scars telling a horrific story. Recovery Girl said, as she grumbled about abused children. Izuku kept quiet since he wouldn't tell her about his past. He was too uncomfortable with authority figures, especially since past experiences would make them allow the bad things to continue to happen. It wasn't until about 9 minutes had passed that Aizawa was the one to show up with Principal Nizu hiding in his scarf. They looked at the scar-riddled boy in front of them sleeping as Recovery Girl had sat on a desk in the corner of the room with multiple images of Izuku's scar-riddled form. Standing near her, Nizu slipped down from Aizawa's shoulder and landed on the desk to look at the papers on the table. He looked at each and every report from Izuku's past physician as well as the school nurse from previous schools, as they all told one thing: Izuku was abused in his past, and nobody even cared to get him the help he needed. It was here that Izuku had woken up from the induced sleep from energy deprivation from Recovery Girl's quirk had given him. Izuku Midoriya, what the hell happened? Nizu said, as his fur bristled. At Izuku. Izuku hides secrets. Inko goes to UA. Inko Midoriya was a wonderful woman as well as the perfect mother to Izuku. She had been taking care of him as well as supporting his dreams of becoming a hero ever since he was announced quirkless to the masses. So for her to hear about the fact that her son had scars on his back as well as whole body, she was immediately sent into a spiral of worry and fear. She knew that he never had scars whenever she had saw him without a shirt or pants. She had even made sure that he never used makeup. But to hear that he was using hero-grade makeup in order to hide his scars from her as well as those around him, she left her job in order to find out what the hell was going on with her son. She made it to the school within a few minutes of being told about her son's complicated condition as she made it onto the school grounds, being met by his homeroom teacher Aizawa Shota. "I take it that you're Inko Midoriya?" he asked, tired as Izuku had told her. "Yes, my name is Inko Midoriya. Can you tell me what happened?" Inko asked worriedly. "There was a battle training exercise today, and things had gone wrong the moment your son and his friend were placed against the other," Aizawa said, as he led the mother around the school grounds. They continued their conversation as he told her about the fact that her son had hero-grade makeup on his body that covered scars that were on him, and when they arrived in the nurse's office, they saw Izuku sleeping on the cot in the room. Looking at the shocked teachers as well as nurse in the room, Inko knew that this was not something they knew about. Walking over to her son, she placed her hand over his curls, and the teachers and Nizu saw how unconsciously Izuku leaned into her touch. I am sorry, Mom," Izuku mumbled in his sleep. Inko looked closer at her son's eyes as well as his face. She saw the scars of a muzzle having been placed over his mouth and nose. She moved the blanket softly as Izuku turned over to lean into the warmth that covered his body. As he did so, she saw all the scars on his back in the shape of burns, cuts, old bruises, and even some weird writing on his back. She pulled out some glasses and leaned closer to her son's back in order to get a better read of the words, and she immediately placed the blanket back over her son. Aizawa placed a bucket near her as she vomited inside the bucket itself before moving to stiffly sit on one of the chairs nearby. "Mrs. Midoriya, do you know of anyone who could have done this horrible thing to your son?" Nizu asked, concerned for her reaction. "And no. He stopped me from helping him with bullies when the school system prevented us from speaking up about it," Inko said, looking at the ground filled with horror as well as sadness. "If it's any solace, he probably wanted your best wishes at heart," Aizawa said, as he looked at the woman. "I know, he had always worried over my health. Especially since it declined over the years since his diagnosis of being quirkless," Inko said, as Recovery Girl had walked over with some test results. "I took the liberty to check his blood work and x-rays again in order to make sure that he didn't have a quirk, and the tests came back positive that he didn't have a quirk. But I should let you know that the second joint in the pinky toe has been disproven on so many accounts in the past for quirklessness," RG said, as Inko stared at her. "What are you talking about?" Izuku's primary physician told us that the trademark sign for quirklessness was the fact that he had the second toe joint in his pinky toe. Inko asked, confused and concerned. That was incorrect in his hypothesis, but in his blood work is where his quirk genes will be truly shown. Although when he told you your son was quirkless, he was correct, he based it on false information," RG said, as she walked off in order to tend to her sleeping patient. "Mrs. Midoriya, we would like to inform you that you are within your rights in order to ask for a lawyer for your trial of your son," Nizu said, as he stared at Inko. "What are you talking about?" Inko asked, confused. "Well, the person who nearly killed your son as well as put those scars on his body is in this very school at the moment. Although he didn't place all of the scars on him, he was a major offender," Nizu said, as Inko remembered the burned scars and tears began to pour out. "It's Katsuki, isn't it?" Inko asked, a little broken inside. "Yes, unfortunately it is Katsuki Bakugo, he placed those burned scars on him. But there is more concerning information that we need to talk about," Nizu said, as he pointed to a television and showed a certain camera from Aldera Middle School. Izuku was inside his dreams of his past, and he was walking a small trail following one of the people he trusted with his entire life. Katsuki Bakugo. The boy was boisterous, arrogant, determined, as well as very persistent in how he did the things he had done over the years. Izuku had leaned over to the boy as the young man had been his rock whenever things had become too hard to think about in the past when they were friends, and Izuku was thinking about his old friend because of what had happened in the battle trial that day. He was nearly killed by Bakugo today, and from what it looked like he wouldn't have had cared even a little bit about his seemly death. Even if it was by his hand, but Izuku knew better, having his record destroyed because of Izuku's death wouldn't even be the worst thing that he would do to retaliate. He would go to the ends of the earth in order to make sure that Izuku took his own life without his say. But in this dream, everything was completely wrong about Katsuki. It showed him scheming behind his back, bullying him from a perspective from an outsider. Not only that, but it showed Katsuki in a light that he never looked at before. Katsuki was more than just a bully, he was a low-tier villain if he had to think about it now. In the past, Katsuki had used his quirk against Izuku many times and never got in trouble, but the problems that he caused for everyone else was placed on Izuku's records in order to make sure that he couldn't enter a hero school. But now he was on a rooftop standing before the #1 hero himself, All Might. The man was emaciated as well as a skeleton in looks, but the powerful deep blue eyes had been staring at him for a while. "About your question about a quirkless hero, I should think not. Don't take this with a grain of salt, but from my perspective I have one of the most powerful quirks in history, and I was reduced to this by a villain who had been strong enough to damage me. So I would feel like I am sending you to your death if I were to tell you to become a quirkless hero. I feel like it would be on me if you died and left your loved ones without you. So in order to keep you safe for your family, to answer your question about a quirkless hero, don't think I will encourage it. In fact, I will tell you to just try for a new dream. It's alright to dream, kid, just make sure it's realistic," All Might said, walking down the staircase of the building. Izuku was left on the rooftop as he thought about the past that he endured, not to mention the words of All Might, and he couldn't help but think that maybe his dreams of becoming a hero were just that, dreams. But then his dreams had shown him at the UA entrance exams and saving Uraraka-san from being crushed by the zero-pointer and getting her to safety, as well as teaming up with her and taking on the team of Ida-san and Kaken, and he couldn't help but laugh in his dream as he remembered that they beat Kaken and Ida-san. Looking around the space, Izuku stood up from his position of lying on the ground as he felt a sensation of someone rubbing the top of his curls, and with that sensation he leaned into the touch as it reminded him of his mother. Looking down at his body, he saw many scars from his past, and he couldn't help but think about how he looked horrible from a perspective of his own. He could only think that he was ugly to others, since most people don't like those or heroes who were scarred from their past. He had no friends, no family other than his mother. He disowned his own father since the man never visited and divorced his own mother, and the woman he was slowly falling for, he couldn't take it anymore as he started to cry to himself in his dream. Why is she keeping me near her? I didn't do anything to earn her presence. I really didn't. So why is she staying near me if she doesn't like me? Izuku screamed in his mindscape. Years ago, when he was a child, if you told him that his hero complex would probably be his undoing in the future, he would tell you that he would make sure that he was safe himself. But now, he would probably laugh at your face and ask, what took you so long to figure that out? Was it because I don't care for myself like I care for others? Izuku was reliving his harshest memories from his mind, and he couldn't help but think that he did something in a past life that garnered this much hatred from his peers. He never sat near his classmates when it was lunchtime, as he steered clear of them as well as the lunchroom in favor of increasing his mind as well as strength with his teachers. He was extremely lonely and never had a friend since he was literally 4 years old, and the little 4-year-old in his mind had been slowly reaching out to the surface of his mind and showing his true personality to the others in class itself. And it was a clear distinction, as Izuku in class was more outgoing than he was talking to them during any part of the day that wasn't in class. He was extremely introverted as well as very skittish towards others, more so than Koji Koda, their shy and timid classmate. So for Izuku to think that nobody cares for him except his mother really shows how much society had failed him in terms of keeping his spirits high, especially a certain number 1 hero. He still remembers when he found out that his mother secretly had lovers coming over when he was at school. She was extremely touch-starved like he was. And he knew that since he himself was touch-starved, he could only rely on his mother for that, but he really didn't know how much he craved to be touched by someone else when Ochako had grabbed his hand during the exercise when they moved the bomb. When he remembered the touch she gave him with her hand and held it, he remembered how she was looking shocked at him as he never let go of her hand while they went to hide it. But when he told her that he was touch-starved earlier in their planning, she immediately told him that if he wishes to hold hands that she could do that for him, and he refused vehemently, not ready at all for that. But overall, he cared for her opinion and made sure that her contact information was saved on his phone just in case. With Inko, she was currently screaming at all might as the man revealed himself to be the number 1 hero that Izuku talked about to her, crushing his dream, but enough to completely break him. Do you have any idea as to why he asked you that singular question? Inko screamed at all might. He told me that he wanted to know if a quirkless person could ever be a hero like me. I told him no, because I personally don't think we should send someone like that after a villain who could tear him in two with just a flick of his finger. All Might retorted as Inko bared back on him once again. Did it ever occur to you that he was in the condition to leave him on a rooftop after being told to kill himself? Inko yelled again, causing the man to look at her in shock. I never knew that he was told to kill himself. All Might said, as he told her he had no idea that something like that ever happened. At school he is given red spider lilies every day, and you are telling me that in your moment of focus on cleaning up his supplies that you didn't even see any red spider lilies in his backpack? Inko asked, as All Might then mentioned finding some and told her that he thought her son was going to give them to someone he knew later on that day. Inko was furious with that answer, as she basically told him everything he needed to know about the quirkless population statistics on their mortality rate. And after being shown the statistics, he was feeling even worse than he was before, but that paled in comparison to the fact that Izuku was being abused by his peers and schoolmates as well as teachers. That explains his current behavior towards his classmates and teachers. Nizu subtly said aloud. What? Inko asked. He has been completely avoiding most of our teachers that are in close proximity as well as his classmates when they were both in class as well as they are leaving school. In fact, in his training exercise, he had held hands with a young girl, young Uraraka. Nizu said, as Inko stared at him in awe. Is she alright? Is she treating my son okay? Inko asked, as Nizu looked at her with mirth. She was treating your son like a human being, and in fact treats him as if he was a friend, although she really wishes that he sat with her at lunch. Nizu said, as Inko nodded her head. Not good experiences with teachers and students would do that to him. He really isn't trustful of others, especially authority figures, except for me. Inko said, as Nizu nodded. They continued for the next hour talking about what would happen to the old schools that Izuku went to as well as Bakugo when the time was right. All in all, Bakugo would not know what was coming for him when the time came, cause the moment he will be hit with it he will be so unprepared, that he will go ballistic. USJ. Villain attack. Izuku woke up in the room as he was surprised by the fact, he was all alone inside of it. He left the UA building in order to make sure that he could make it home before his mother would worry about him. God forbid him get grounded for being late on returning home from his school without his mother's knowledge. He had been trying his best to increase the amount of time he spent with her since he had been training on how to become an underground hero since he was around 9 years of age. He walked up to his apartment's door, and as he was about to open it he heard the sound of a very secret conversation being made. "I will make sure that your son is safe at our school, Mrs. Midoriya, you have my word on that." I never thought that young Bakugo would release that kind of an attack inside of training. A voice called out, as it was similar to who he talked to about 10 months ago. Inside his brain he thought about the conversation he had with the specific hero he remembered from 10 months ago, and he was saddened by how he failed his teacher. He was trying to show that he couldn't be taken lightly, and all that happened was that he was taken not as seriously as he should have been. Then the words from Katsuki and All Might rang inside his head from all those months ago, all those months of pain and suffering at the hands of a bully who he desperately hoped would return to being his friend. "If you want a quirk so bad, how about you just head to a roof and jump off? Maybe you will get a quirk in your next life," Katsuki said, as he caused some explosions in his hands. "Young man, I cannot on good conscience send a young quirkless man out into a fight knowing that he will lose. I won't sugarcoat it, as it is going to be incredibly tough for you to become a hero PRD without the HPSC stopping you from attaining your license. But at least I can have on my conscience that I tried to steer you to a safer job for you to make into a good dream. It's alright to dream, kid, just make sure that those dreams you have are at least realistic," All Might said, walking away. As Izuku was reliving a memory in his mind, he never noticed how the front door of his home had opened up and was revealed to be his homeroom teacher Aizawa Shota. As the man looked down at Izuku he had noticed a faraway look in his eyes, as if he was remembering something that happened a long time ago. "Midoriya?" he asked, only to not receive an answer. "Midoriya?" Aizawa called out again, this time causing Izuku to leave his train of thought. Aizawa-sensei?" Izuku asked, confused. "I'm sorry about what happened in your class today. That support item wasn't supposed to be a part of Bakugo's hero suit. It should have been decommissioned by the HPSC for how destructive it could be to the area he is supposed to be patrolling," Aizawa said, as he placed a hand on Izuku's left shoulder and definitely didn't miss the flinch from the boy. "Sai, I know that your past is horrible, but you need to talk to Hound Dog about it in order to find some kind of closure. I hope you will get the help you need, problem child. I hope you know that we heroes as UA are trustworthy," Aizawa said, as he left Izuku on his front doorstep as he left to patrol the area. That night, Izuku couldn't sleep. He had been trying to think about what his homeroom teacher had told him about seeking help and decided that before he makes it to homeroom, that he would see Hound Dog. If there was anyone he should trust, it was the school's counselor, someone who could ask him the questions as well as give him the answers he really needed at this point in time. So attempting to fall asleep once again, he was able to do this before he woke up at around 5 in the morning and leaving his room to do his morning run. After about 15 minutes of running, Izuku returned to his home and found his mother preparing some breakfast for him. "Morning, sweetie. I know that you want to keep everything that has happened to you secret, but I want you to know that you can trust me with hearing what happened over the last 10 years. You know that, right?" Inko asked, worriedly. I know that. I just don't want you and Auntie Mitsuki to lose the friendship you each have because of MME," Izuku said, sitting down at the table. "Well, you have 3 hours before school starts, so you can tell me what happened," Inko asked, as she wanted to make sure that her son could answer and know that he wasn't being forced. And it didn't take long before the DMN broke as he told her everything that had happened to him over the course of 10 long years of abuse, mental torment, the abuse from his teachers as well as peers, how Katsuki called him a name meaning useless, to Katsuki using his quirk against him at any point of any day possible, all the way to the slime villain incident. As well as what happened before he met All Might between him and Katsuki, and to hear that from Izuku made her heart break from how much pain her son has been in just to make sure that she never found out. How he had made sure that as soon as they were threatened with the police in order to stop them from making complaints about his previous school, how he had any and all burns, cuts, bruises, as well as markings on his body just to make sure she doesn't worry more about him than needed. As he was leaving out the front door earlier than usual, Inko walked over to him and gave him a hug as she cried over his shoulder. "I'm sorry for not being able to help you when you were hurt so much by them. If you ever need to talk to me again, please be sure to tell me." "Okay?" Inko asked, as Izuku hugged her back. "I will, Mom, I got to go," Izuku said, leaving home in order to talk to Hound Dog that morning. Izuku arrived at the school counselor's office as he knocked on the door. As he heard the gruff come in from the other side of the door, he opened it to find Hound Dog preparing his office. "Hello there, Midoriya, I apologize for not being prepared for a student to come at the moment. Is there anything you need from me?" Hound Dog asked, curiously. I've been told to talk to you about anything that has been bothering me," Izuku said, entering the room slowly. "Well, you can take a seat on the couch nearby, and I will sit down at the recliner across from it," Hound Dog said, as he grabbed a notebook. As they sat on the couch and recliner, Hound Dog got his notebook steady for what was going to happen. "So is there anything you wish for me to answer?" Hound Dog asked, recording their conversation on his audio recorder. What does it mean to have a FF friend?" Izuku asked, as he stared at Hound Dog. "Can you clarify why you are asking me this, Midoriya?" Hound Dog asked. I've been following Bakugo ever since I was wanting to know if the relationship I have with him is toxic or not. I know that he says that we're not friends anymore, that much is obvious now more than ever. But can you tell me what a friend is supposed to do for theirs?" Izuku asked, as he stared into the round eyes of Hound Dog. "Well, if I remember correctly, a friend is supposed to be there for you no matter what the situation calls for. They are to hang out with you, defend you when they know that you did nothing wrong, as well as go around places as you talk about your days with them. From what I can remember from my time as a youngster," Hound Dog said, as Izuku became a little more skittish as he quietly questioned once more. Do they hurt you? Do they wish for you to die?" Izuku asked, as Hound Dog looked at Izuku with a different kind of emotion. "Can you tell me the situation where this friend of yours hurt you? As well as wished for your death?" Hound Dog questioned, very alarmed by his skittishness as well as kept himself from growling. He told me that after school on the D-Day of the slime villain incident. But for the first part of your Q question, he has been hurting me ever since I was 4. Izuku said, as Hound Dog immediately stood up, causing the boy to flinch hard. He had even placed his arms and hands in a defensive posture in order to protect himself from any and all harm. "Young man, that is not how a friend should behave. A friend is supposed to make sure that you are alright in both mind and body. They should never wish for you to be dead, nor should they assault you for whatever reason they wish," Hound Dog said, as he sat down next to Izuku so as to let the boy slowly exit his defensive posture. "So him telling me to kill myself 10 months ago was wrong?" Izuku asked. "Yes, it is wrong to say that to anyone. Is there a reason why he told you this?" Hound Dog asked, restraining his anger and fury. Because I am quirkless," Izuku said, as Hound Dog released a sigh. "Let me guess, everyone around you never stopped him or joined in on your beatdown?" Hound Dog asked, as he watched Izuku nod his head. "Well, I will need to make sure that you are not thinking thoughts of suicide. Have you been getting thoughts of cutting your own body in order to feel pain?" Hound Dog asked, concerned. "And no. I've never thought about that. That wouldn't be heroic of me," Izuku said, as Hound Dog slowly moved his paw over Izuku's head and ruffled his hair. "It's alright to show weakness, young man. It shows that you have the strength to show someone who isn't someone who you love that you can be hurt inside. How long has it been since you were ever treated like a human being?" Hound Dog asked. "Not since I was 4. Izuku said, as Hound Dog sighed in sadness. "Head over to your homeroom class. Just make sure that you can focus on your classes for today. From what I hear, Aizawa-san will be taking your class on a field trip," Hound Dog said, as Izuku nodded his head. As the boy left the room, Hound Dog had called his boss intent on telling him about what he had heard from the boy himself. This boy would be getting some justice if he has anything to say about it, and nobody is going to stop him if Bakugo tries what he did the other day from tearing him limb from limb. Entering his classroom, Izuku had sat down in his seat as he focused on his class assignments for the day. Everyone was talking about how there was a group of reporters at the front gates as they were hoping to get an interview with All Might. As soon as the rest of the class trickled in, Aizawa had entered the classroom as he first looked at Izuku, who was more relaxed in his class for the first time since he started. Sighing in relief that Izuku had talked to Hound Dog at least today, he talked about what they were doing today in order to continue their day. He even told the class that there will be a field trip today for their heroics class today and that they should be prepared to wear their hero costumes. As it would turn out, classes at UA was not as heroic as most people would think about, since there was math, science, language arts, as well as modern art history and others. But as the class were eating lunch for the day, one of the girls noticed that their resident green bean wasn't present in the lunchroom. And it was a brown-haired girl who had been keeping an eye on the boy, as she had noticed that he kept his distance from others in the class. She decided to leave the cafeteria in order to find him, and sure enough she found him standing outside of the school as he was eating some of his homemade lunch that he brought from home. "Hey!" she called out, somehow scaring the poor boy. As he jumped about 10 feet in the air, the girl ran over and apologized for scaring him so badly. It's fine, no harm done. I think I will move to a new location if you were wanting to sit here," Izuku said, as he got up to leave before his arm was grabbed. "Hey, I don't want you to leave. But if I am making you uncomfortable, then I will leave, okay?" the girl asked, as Izuku nodded before sitting back down. "So, why are you out here? There is the cafeteria for a reason, you know," the girl said, as Izuku shook his head. "Don't want to go there, otherwise I will be never mind," Izuku said, stuffing his face. "Are you afraid of the others in the cafeteria?" the girl asked, as Izuku looked at her with fear in his eyes. Just as he was about to sit up, the girl introduced herself. "My name is Uraraka Ochako, what's yours?" Ochako asked, as she watched as Izuku slowly sat back down and took deep breaths. My name is Midoriya Izuku. And I am aiming for being a U Underground H hero," Izuku said, as she looked at him with a smile. "I'm aiming for becoming a rescue hero like 13. Ochako said, as Izuku came out of his shell a little. 13. She is the best hero for rescue operations. I have a notebook about her quirk and how she has used her quirk to save hundreds if not thousands of civilians." Mutter, Izuku gushed as Ochako looked at him with a smile on her face. As soon as Izuku heard her giggling, he stopped his muttering as he looked at her as she caught her breath. "Oh man, I never knew that you'd be a hero nerd. That's a good thing though," Ochako said, as she finished laughing before seeing his face faltering at her laughter and fixing her answer to him. I've been told that my muttering was creepy as well as scary. Not to mention annoying," Izuku said, as he looked away. "I personally think that it comes with your personality. It just needs to be brought out," Ochako said, as Izuku looked away from her. "Too bright," Izuku thought as Ochako smiled at him. It was here that they were about to continue their conversation when the school's alarm system went off as reporters flooded the front gates from a dusted wall. That hole in the wall seems to have been disintegrated from the outside. Questions for later. We need to get back to class, Uraraka-san, Izuku said, as he put his food away as he pulled Ochako away from the area. After the event of the destroyed wall, Izuku and his class were on a bus heading to the USJ for rescue training. Izuku had been a little hyped about what was going to happen as the other students started to talk about quirks. "Midoriya-chan, can I ask you a question?" Azui-san asked, as Izuku looked over at her. Sure, Azui-chan," Izuku said, before Azui talked again. "Call me Tsu, and what will you be doing there? I mean, no offense, but you don't have a quirk that would allow you to do the things we can." Sue said, as she stared at him. None taken. I learned how to do martial arts from a teacher in downtown Mizutofu, but I want the experience of rescue training if I happen across a devastating event that caused people to be trapped in rubble or lost in the woods or out on sea. Izuku said, as Tsu nodded her head. BSTRD will probably be the damsel in distress for this class. A rough voice called out from the back of the bus. I'll be honest there Bakugo, your personality will not gain you any followers. Kaminari said, as he laughed at Bakugo's face. You wanna go dunce face? Katsuki screamed. Well at least something is proving that he won't be a massively popular hero. Tsu said as Izuku looked at the scene with shock and awe. Kaken's being teased. This is a new thing for me to experience. Izuku thought to himself. Don't even get me started on his quirkless butt. Katsuki called out, as Izuku sighed in disappointment. Even when we're inside UA, none of the bullying will stop. Izuku thinks to himself. Ochako who had saw his look stared at Bakugo with a glare that could kill a lion. What the F do you want pink cheeks? He called out. You should really learn how to be nice to your peers, you never know when they might kick your butt. Ochako said, as Katsuki went out on a tangent against those who were quirkless. As everyone listened to him list off things that quirkless weren't capable of, Ochako watched as Izuku curled more and more into a small ball as everyone else noticed his behavior as well. Shut up. We're here. Aizawa said, as they arrived at their location. Standing off the bus, Izuku looked at the USJ with a mirth in his eyes as he pulled out a notebook from thin air to write a document about it from his personal experience. From the looks in a sketch of it to the person who was coming down the stairs towards them, and now that he thinks about it the only one who should be here was the pro-heroine 13. As he takes notice of the heroine, he noticed that it was 13 as Ochako gushed about her favorite heroine. She also talked about how her quirk was used for any and all rescues that she remembered from her childhood. Yes, and my quirk has the ability to kill. 13 said, with an ominous tone. My quirk has the power to tear you apart limb from limb if you are pulled into its pull of gravity. 13 said, as Aizawa asked where All Might was. Especially since he was supposed to be here based on the teacher's tone of voice. As they were about to continue with their plans of their field trip there, the power went out of the building as a swirling mass of purple showed up in the plaza. Aizawa-sensei was this supposed to happen? Izuku asked, as his teacher looked over at him. This was not planned, get to the bus and evacuate. Aizawa said, as he pulled out his yellow goggles and covered his eyes. It was when he left to fight the villains that Izuku noticed how he was completely outnumbered by the villains. Too much. There are too many villains. Izuku mumbled as Tenya had noticed him not following them and pulled him along. It was here that a new villain blocked their way out of the building and to the outside world. Hello golden eggs of the hero course at UA Academy. I am Kurojiri, and I am here to make sure the villains here kill you all. He said, as he prepared to send everyone away. Not yet. Both Kirishima and Bakugo said, as they launched at the villain. As they phased through his fog, 13 ran over to attack as the villain continued to monologue. Well done for golden eggs, now disperse. He called out, as 13 made her presence known. Not if I have anything to say about it. She called out, as she used her quirk to pull him into her black hole. As expected of pro-heroine 13. But I have things to do. The villain said, as he made a portal behind her causing her to break her suit's back open and lacerate her back with her own quirk. Once that was done, he dispersed some of the students in the area and into the USJ so they could be killed by the villains in the area. Izuku would fall into one of the portals and he would find himself falling towards a mountainous area of the USJ.